meets real life. We break down state and federal issues, showing how policy shapes everyday Americans. Engaged, balanced, and informative. That's our promise. I'm your host, Mikhail Jenkins.
And this is Muhammad Alec.
And today we're going to continue on with the Iran war and other developments around the globe and domestically as well. I know we usually and normally do start with the domestic side of things, but we're going to go ahead and start with the global dimensions and provide a update on what's really been going on. So as we know, there have been intensified strikes on energy infrastructure. So Israeli forces struck Iran's South Pars field, the world's largest natural gas field and the source of roughly 75% of Iran's natural gas production.
And I
That
just want to
powers the
say that
yeah.
Qatar also gets natural gas from that field. It's not just Iran.
Yeah, no, not just Iran, but that Iran was the field that was attacked. And then approximately 85% of the country's electricity grid also comes from there as well, which has a triggering of fires, which have been escalating. And there's been more strikes on additional energy fields. The US was informed of Israel's strike and did not actually partake in the strike itself. But however, Iranian state media confirmed the attack while Qatar, which shares the field, which is what Muhammad was saying, condemned the strike as dangerous and irresponsible, which it basically is because we have stated and have asked for, Israel not to attack these oil fields or these major pieces of infrastructure and energy infrastructure. And we're seeing that they're just going about it anyway. And in a direct response, a major fire broke out at Qatar's Ras Laffan LNG complex, which is the world's largest such facility, after an Iranian attack. So all these attacks are going on. Israel attacks Iran, Iran attacks Qatar. So we're seeing these Gulf states being attacked by Iran. As we spoke earlier, some of these Gulf states were looking at some security deals that have been made with the United States and refiguring them towards Iranian fixtures, basically. They're seeing that the U.S. isn't that great of an ally when it comes to protecting these Gulf states when situations like this in the Middle East arise. And even more breaking reports indicate that Iran just destroyed actually the jet fuel deposit in Saudi Arabia, which is used by U.S. Air Forces. So we're also seeing what we use to fuel our jets for various military actions and reasons. These sites are being attacked as well. So Iran is just launching everything at everyone at this point. There is no really clear sight on what is not going to be a target when it comes to Iran, and they feel like they've been backed into this scenario from the strikes from Israel and from the United States. And we're seeing this high level of escalation and retaliatory attacks. Additionally, Iran declared on the assault on its own oil facilities that the enemy committed suicide. And we have moved to a full economic war, which is basically what this is really turning into on the cusp of it. Really was starting as from the administration stating that we're trying to topple a violent regime to wanting to protect Israel, to that Iran was going to attack first, till now we're just going after energy infrastructures that is going to higher increased costs globally and in the states. Like me and Muhammad were talking, I saw gas today was 389 and is only going to continue to rise. And then Jerome Powell was even stating that these inflation numbers that we're seeing is in a two-part from the tariffs and as well as the war. Two things pushed by President Trump. So this is all with his nonsense policies that he's put place. One, the illegal, enactment of the tariffs and the illegal um, beginning of this war. Two illegal acts that have brought immense harm to Americans in their pockets and economically within the state, within every state, and then within the nation as a whole.
What I really find the most interesting about this all is just like the impending energy crisis that the globe's going to see due to it. I mean, I I'm not sure how many people know how much of the world's energy really comes from the Middle East, but a lot of natural gas and a lot of oil really comes out from those OPEC countries. And we've already seen just the effect of the Strait of Hormuz being shut down. Now, take in mind, WTI is US crude oil and the spot price for it. So just by that strait itself being limited by Iran to no longer allow Western nations to be able to come in, or specifically U.S. and Israel, we and like limiting how much of it can come in and out. We've seen gas prices in the last since this year alone, since the beginning of this year, we've seen gas prices go up 77% as to where it currently stands.
Yeah,
And furthermore, that's not taking in the effect the new damages fully of the new and impending damages that we're going to be seeing coming in from now Iran attacking Saudi Arabian fields, Qatar fields, Qatar fields, and more. And I, mm, I think this is going to be really used for a big push. Now, this is slightly not really off topic, but just a similar topic, same field of thought. I think this is going to be a very opportunistic time for China to move in on Taiwan. And I think that we're already seeing skyrocketing energy prices in America with data centers taking over, making electric prices go up. Now we have oil prices going up, gas is going up. That applies to everything, truck drivers, planes, and more, and just the normal commute, the normal American. And now we're also going to be seeing that big tech arm of the sole thing keeping the American stock market alive also start to be affected, most likely. And what I think is the most interesting about this all is where the Middle Eastern Gulf states are going to go with this, because they've already thrown their hat into the ring at the moment for fighting with Israel and America, and it's clear how well that's worked out for them in just after a few weeks. And we've seen Saudi Arabia, which was publicly for bombing Iran and using America and not Israel to do so, we've seen them come out and have strong words against how America has been simply favoring defending Israel over any of the other countries. And what I want to note as well is that the more in the last week, Iran has hit more targets with its missiles than it did in the first few weeks. So they're getting better at what they're doing in terms at this point in time. Now that could
yeah,
change. The Americans or the Gulf states could counter it and get better defensively or just planning wise. But at this point in time, it's not looking ideal for the countries that are going against Iran from the sheer point of what they're doing. And they I remember this was back in a few years ago, but Saudi Arabia had cut its oil production by 10% to do some needed repairs for the refinery. And when that happened, gas prices went up about 20% in one day. And that was just by it cutting 10% of its oil production temporarily.
yeah,
Now you start throwing in the threat of very non-planned indefinite status of this oil refineries and more being cut out, and it really introduces the idea of how high can gas and oil go. And I mean, we were talking a little bit about it before the podcast started about how things are just going to get even worse in the summer when people are driving and flying more.
yeah.
And I mean, the higher the demand goes and the lower the supply goes, the higher the price is going to go. It's just that's one of the few things that are very easy to understand when it comes to economics.
Yeah, it's going to
And
be very, very hard for a lot of Americans. A lot of
and
Americans once it comes to the summertime and once this war really is weeks, months. Let's hope not, but it seems like so.
probably
A
months,
year
yeah.
out, you know what I mean? Because Iranian officials are warning that these U.S. Israeli attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure are only going to lead to uncontrollable repercussions whose effects extend to engulf the entire world. And that's really what you're talking about, Mohammed. You're going to see
Yeah.
the entire world be engulfed in a energy crisis and an energy war. Tehran has ordered Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE to evacuate their energy facilities, threatening imminent strikes on five specific Gulf targets, and also announced it will levy a 10% toll on all ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And with all that going on, Trump's been saying we need NATO's help, we need Japan, China, South Korea's help with the Strait of Hormuz. It's now being reported that the US is now accumulating forces for a potential weeks-long operation to seize the Strait of Hormuz. This
Which
is
would be
according,
interesting to see because
yeah,
we don't have most of our forces over there. We're using a minority of our forces with
yeah. I think
much
there's about
more logistical issues than Iran is, where they have literally their entire military right there.
Yeah, I think there's about, I believe, 5,000 troops that have been moved and have been like moved from the United States or at least from other areas from the world where we house our troops. I think 5,000 are now like just within that area. Uh, but I think that's going to be used for this potential weeks-long operation to try to seize the strait. He even told his general. He stated, "Why can't we just forcibly take over the strait? It's obviously like, why can't we do it?" He's like, "We just can't do it."
Yeah,
So now we're gonna
what are we gonna do?
yeah,
how is
how do
us
you plan to do
controlling
that?
it gonna allow us to then handle the commercial aspect of all the ships coming in? What are we gonna do? Are we gonna take over? It
Yeah,
just like,
it's
to give
it's
an
idiotic.
example, just recently an Indian ship passed through and they paid the tariff and that 10% in the Chinese yuan. So is the America going to just come in and try to force
Yeah,
Chinese allies to pay in US dollar? Yeah, how do
no,
you think
they
that's going
won't
to work out?
because I think that is a an opening condition from Iran. They would allow ships to pass, but they would have to sell the oil in the Chinese dollar, in the Chinese currency, not with the US dollar, which would have exasperated effects across the United States if that was the case. That would very much bring down the value of the dollar as we have seen with this presidency. But as Trump is planning for this week's long operation to secure the Strait of Hormuz, NATO Secretary General has confirmed that alliance members are actively discussing the best way to keep the strait open amid the escalation maritime threats. The Israeli Ministry of Defense has now also authorized the IDF to eliminate any senior Iranian official without additional approval, declaring the war has reached new levels and will escalate across all fronts, which it's escalated across on all fronts from both sides. We've escalated, as in the United States, the Israelis have escalated, and Iran has escalated to very dangerous levels. And with all this information coming out about Israel just focusing on leadership without even approval for attacks, Iran has assigned 3 to 7 backup officials for each military post. It's almost like a hydra. You cut one head off, two more grow. So they know that Israel is up to these levels of attacks and have this level of information and are making plans to ensure that they keep that stone wall of leadership and command intact and that doesn't fall apart if the one person is taken out.
It's interesting to talk about that because there's all the rumors that Netanyahu's dead and they're just trying to cover it up.
Yeah,
Have you heard about
there's like a
that?
video of him with like I saw that, but it was eventually debunked. It was like a video of him with 6 fingers or something of that nature. I mean, who
Oh, no,
knows?
it's just
But
it's 2 things largely. It's the no public appearances in the last week and a half, and it's also the
yeah,
fact that, they have released these videos that have been strange, to say the least.
yeah, they
The
have
one
been
video
very,
that
very
I'm
strange.
thinking of particularly, it's a video where, like, he's in Jerusalem, which is in the West Bank, mind you. He's in Jerusalem, near Jerusalem, at, like, a cafe in the mountains during wartime, and that he is and he has like a ring on his finger, and just him moving his hand you can see the ring vanish and then come back. And then I would love to see if it actually is them just trying to cover it up. And then, but point being is, and what's related to what you said, is that Iran does have those capabilities where they just clearly have a line of, all right, well, if this guy gets taken out, this is who is next in line.
Yeah,
And
they just layered
whereas
it in.
Especially
Mhm.
with the West, there's not that much of a quick replacement being able to be done. Like, think about worst case if the president were to die, a VP would be up next, but then that would be a massive shift for the most part in terms of how things will be done, because just going from one president to the other, especially going from MAGA to Vance, which would be MAGA light, there would be changes done to how the procedures are gone about. Whereas
Oh
the
yeah, of
Iran, it's
course.
very,
It's a more it's layered in, I would say. Like,
what,
yes, we have our, levels of succession when it comes, but for them, those 3 to 7, they all have the same ideology and same mission in their mind. That makes them all synopsis and all together. When you start to get to our structure, each ideology is gonna change. Yes, it's all Republican administration, but one individual isn't gonna think the same as another individual just on these issues. Like,
I
Trump
mean,
obviously thinks more different than Vance on various issues, even though he is the vice president. Same as with Speaker Mike Johnson, who would be the third in line. I
yeah,
believe he is the third in line. They are all
currently he
different
is.
individuals. When you get to the Iranians, it's all they understand what they have to do for the betterment of the Iranian people. And it's a religious thing as well that's stuck to it compared to the United States. It's not really a religiousness to our level of secession and or the presidency and things of that nature. It's not viewed as a religious hierarchy as the supreme leader of Iran is. So that's why when they just keep taking one down after another, you're just emboldening those other officers and making them even more hard lined than they probably previously were with those supervisors still in power or even still alive. But
And the
as
big thing that I wanna add is that in all faiths in general, but Christianity has been very secularized, so a lot of people don't really know what's in the Bible. They just know the general stories of Christ and Jonah and Adam and of Goliath, David and Goliath, and things like that. But just to give an example, of the differences of the secularism of the Christian West versus the more stringent mm, orthodox belief of the Islamic Middle East, is that in the Bible, women are required to wear a hijab, or the head covering. You never see that except on nuns. And then you'll see Christians also use that as a term, as a means of essentially insulting or making fun of Muslims for who do that, as if it's saying it's oppression. Well, your book says the same, but you don't do it. And in Christianity as well, it talks about being a martyr for God, and Islam does as well. Now, that's actually a common point you'll see the West use against Islam in these Middle Eastern countries is, oh, their religion tells them if they die, they go to heaven fighting for God. Yeah, your book says the same exact thing. I mean, we even talked about the other day how there's some militant people, including Pete Hesgith, who has said this is God's plan for a war, and saying that this is essentially something like divine. And in Iran, they've got the mentality of, well, if we fight to defend our country against the West, we're gonna die. If we die, we go to heaven, which is actually backed by what the book says. If you die fighting for in the name of God or defend your people, yeah, you'll go to heaven. So there's that big culture of martyrism, and the there's that big culture of martyrism, and that isn't prevalent in the West. So, what I think that
Mhm.
we're going to be really seeing here over the next few days, well, weeks and months, is the West will decide, EU, America, Israel, and more will decide what they really want to do and how they want to do it. Whereas we're still in a situation with the East where Iran is not backing down by any means. If not, if anything, they're more emboldened than ever. And
Mhm.
also, there's going to be the Gulf states who, or South Asian countries, and Asia in general, the allies, who are in the situation of, well, where do we go from here? I mean, at this
Yeah.
point in time, actually, I don't know if you saw this, Mikkel, but Tulsi said that Pakistan is now the greatest nuclear threat to America.
Yeah, I
They,
did see her horrible of a testimony, which we will definitely get into. But
yeah. And so, like, Tulsi saying Pakistan is the greatest nuclear threat to America at this point in time is one, a giant goal shift post, from, oh, Iran
Yeah.
is the greatest threat to now Pakistan's the greatest threat.
Well, remember Israel was saying Turkey as well. See, they just want to topple off these countries just to further expand Israeli foothold within the Middle East. Because if you look at it on the strategic standpoint for the United States, it benefits us only because they're really our only friend within that area, our only true ally, and it comes to sense that we can call on them for anything, they can call on us for anything. Just in that strategic sense, when you look at it, it makes sense for them to want to label these other countries as evil, as having obviously nuclear capabilities that either need to be stripped away or need to be stopped altogether. And it's just that this compilement on compilement of list of errands that we're doing for Israel is becoming very prevalent for the American voter. As we were saying in the last episode, the sentiment for the support for Israel is drowning in every single
Plummeting.
category, and it only makes sense as to why. Like overall, looking at the military operations, U.S. and Israeli forces have hit approximately 15,000 targets inside Iran since operations began on February 28th, conducted about 11,000 combat flights, destroyed more than 100 Iranian vessels, and deployed roughly 50,000 American service members to the Middle East, with the total U.S. cost of the war approaching 25 billion, or roughly 11,500 per second. And on top of
Yeah.
all this, the U.S. made Patriot air defense missiles have been largely successful in the stopping of the Iranian Shahed drones, which were those very cheap drones that were, I think, were made for like $30,000. So this is a lot better, but also it doesn't add up to all the math because we are still spending so much money, $4 million for a missile to destroy a $20,000 drone. This is only illustrating the problem that has really haunted the West's military planners since the early days, and even the Ukrainian war. Even from that, they were worried about it, but now it's even on a higher cusp because the enemy is much greater, and can do a lot more compared to this Russia and Ukraine is the situation that has been going on. Because I
I
think I would
mean,
agree that what we're seeing in Iran and Israel is much more damage than what we've seen happen in Russia and Ukraine war.
you can say whatever you want about Russia, Ukraine. Russia wasn't going in with the sole intention of ethnically cleansing and
Yeah,
seizing the
exactly.
area. They wanted to keep the people alive for the most part because then they're just claiming dead, bloody land. And they didn't want to come in to claim
Yeah.
dead, bloody land. They wanted to come in to claim economic zones further and
Hmm.
buffer zones for their own good.
Yep.
And
Expand their foothold, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
they get more access to the Black Sea. And
Hmm.
one thing that is really interesting progression in this instance with the Iranian Israeli problem is since Tulsi has talked about how Pakistan is the greatest nuclear threat to America, it brings up the question of if Israel and America will attack Pakistan of any kind, which one would be extremely short-sighted. But they're using the same rhetoric that they use for the Iranian strikes, that these people are a threat to America. Now, keep in mind that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have a pact. If one gets attacked, it's like the other one got attacked. So we already see the United States
Yeah.
government making enemies of Pakistan, who has this very strong defense deal with Saudi Arabia. The last thing that we need in the Middle East is to start making enemies with the only actual nuclear enemy, aside from God-forsaken Israel, make an enemy of the only other nuclear capable country, and then we get rid of our best ally in the Middle East in the process because we were just so hungry to attack these people in the support of Israel and more. And
Yeah.
what they're saying is that Pakistan is working with China and India and Russia to make these missiles that are able to reach the United States of America from the Middle East. Now, what I find so preposterous about this is that to me, it just screams the same stuff that we've been hearing about Iran for years of, oh, yeah, these people
Yeah.
are weeks away, months away from being a threat to America. They want to bomb America. They're going to get nukes. They're
Yeah.
going to bomb America. And honestly, like if Pakistan does get attacked by America, that's going to result in a lot more of allies getting involved. Saudi's going to get
Yeah.
involved. Now, Saudi
Well, it's
Arabia is
like,
going to have to defend Iran out of all
yeah.
things. Then Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Iran are on one side. Okay, well, what are the other Muslim countries going to do? Are they just going to now keep helping the West and Israel? Or are they going to
No,
join the Muslims?
no,
Well,
they're
what's China
going.
going to do now that India is nearly getting involved? India and Pakistan are not allies. But if America is attacking Pakistan, for all we know, India might do something to get involved. It's it's scary. Yeah,
No,
honestly, like I hate to
it is
say
scary.
World War III capability, but a World War One and Two start. World War One started with with the murder of a royal in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the old Austria-Hungary Empire. Who would have thought that a prince, an archduke, being assassinated in a European city would lead to a world war? You know, who can guess that us being trying to strong arm Iran might lead to a third world war?
Yeah.
And this is where I really think those great powers are getting involved, is that Russia has been actively expanding its intelligence and military cooperation with Iran, and they've been supplying satellite imagery and upgraded drone technology aimed at United States forces, because the weaker the United States gets, the better this is for the other superpowers, Russia and China, which are much more allied with us as a duo than they are with anybody else. And then that also brings in mind the issue that as they continue to work on the strategic goal there is of prolonging the conflict, because that benefits both Moscow economically and militarily. China is also closely studying the U.S. war with Iran to learn from their tactics and their weaknesses. I mean, a big thing that we see is this is an opportunity, absolutely, for these massive countries to see how the United States operates on a global scale for military uses. I mean, we saw when it came to the Afghanistan, Iraqi invasions and occupations, it was a 20 plus year effort that was also backed by a lot of investment. More than $1 trillion was invested into the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And when we were able to get out of it, seeming like we were the winner, not the winners, but not the losers. But in this instance, this is much more focused and pigeonholed on how we are operating and conceiving this as a nation. So, especially with China having the potential future conflict over Taiwan, which we've talked about a few times, officials are saying that China sees an advantage as the U.S. shifts attention and military resources from Asia to the Middle East, weakening its presence in that Indo-Pacific area, which is where Taiwan is. And we've already seen China actually send in more ships to surround Taiwan. The plan is, from what I've read, is that they're going to economically strangle Taiwan until there is no choice but be able to take over Taiwan with very little militant effort. Because I mean, we've seen it on every country in the world is subject to standards that we try to emphasize as a global society of how you operate war. The only countries not subject to that with standards is the United States and Israel.
Yeah.
And so China
Really
is
just,
thinking, well, how can we go about this? How can we seize Taiwan? And and the more the United States uses these weapons and heavily uses its own weapons, missiles, and more to defend these countries, and Israel specifically, the more beneficial this is for China, Russia, India, these other major powers who are just saying, well, we can literally just wait this out, let the U.S. deplete its stock munitions and supply, see how weak or strong they are in a cross global warfare occasion and a hot war instead of like a slower occupation, and let's see what happens. And speaking of Taiwan, in a related development, actually, China offered them a peaceful unification in exchange for LNG supplies, but the island refused and decided to buy more gas from the United States. The new supreme leader of Iran, Mujtaba Khamenei, survived the initial decapitation after he was attempted to be killed by American missile and Iranian missile attacks. And now he's fleeing to Russia, where he is now recovering. And they have been debating in Washington whether or not they should strike Russian soil for this. Now, Netanyahu is reportedly focused on blocking any Trump pathways to ceasefire negotiations by systematically targeting Iranian leaders most inclined to talk, which we saw exactly that when they were holding peace talks for Palestine in Qatar. And then Israel bombed Qatar, where they were holding the peace talks, specifically exactly where they were holding the peace talks. So the intention isn't peace at all. The intention is to kill the people who are in your way and being able to destroy these countries so that they're no longer any bit of a powerful presence. Now, I think this is really, in a sense, Israel is biting far more than it can chew.
Yeah, they're
Far more than it.
really biting off more than they can chew, and thank you for that great analysis there. It's a lot of things that are going on and really peeling back the layers to where, yes, we are allowing Israel to do basically anything in their right mind, and looking at them trying to target Pakistan and or even Turkey, you're going to see these Muslim countries consolidate around Iran. Because right now that everyone is seeing that Iran can stand up to the United States and Israeli bombardment. They can stand up and almost match it in the same regard. And as Mohammed was stating, China is watching very closely. They are watching every single move, every single interceptor that hits a missile, all the spending that is going on, and all the opening of the military strategic playbook that the United States is really letting out. They're going to be able to just take that information, digest it, and try to use that in their own advantages when it comes to Taiwan down the road. Now, as know, we talked about Taiwan becoming a very important conflict within a year or two. It's unfortunate that the United
Maybe
States is
even quicker than
assessing,
that, to be honest.
yeah, definitely quicker than that. And the United States is assessing that that there is no buildup at the moment. There is no inclination that China is amassing forces for a strategic takeover of Taiwan. I feel like that offering of a peaceful reunification is the first shot fired, because now this is more recent. We're going to try to give an olive branch to bring them back over to our sides, but Taiwan ignored it, denied it, and continues to buy oil and weapons from the United States. So we're seeing that Taiwan is becoming very critical. United States is isolating itself by having Israel perpetrate all around the Middle East, and we're having our own individuals within the intelligence community point out to these countries and stating that they are now the new nuclear threat within the region. So with all this going on, we're seeing that NATO allies won't come to help us for the Strait of Hormuz. We're trying to put our own troops to do that. We're seeing that no one is wants to help us with these strikes or even within the war itself, because they don't believe that they should, and that it's Israel's war. So with all this going on, we are truly isolating ourselves and shooting ourselves in both feet as this conflict continues to barrel down, because it's only going to get worse from here. And want to get more into insider information looking at national security sources. So, multiple national security sources with direct knowledge of the campaign have provided the following assessment. America is now 1 week away from exhausting its supply of interceptor missiles, after which there would be no effective means of stopping incoming Iranian missiles and drones targeting Israel, Jordan, Qatar, and the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Iran has deliberately withheld its most advanced cruise missiles as the US attempts to destroy these launch sites, which have largely failed, and a significant portion do remain operational. So if Washington cannot guarantee protection of regional allies, which we saw Saudi Arabia complain about when they got hit, this will ensure push for peace indefinitely for not everyone. Everyone won't be seeing a piece of peace if we're not able to protect our Gulf states, if we're not able to lead as we've always been able to. We're only diminishing our stance on the global stage. And with this stockpile depletion, it's going to be hard to really gauge how long we can stay in this fight and continue to attack Iran and then also have munitions for what's going on in Ukraine. And God forbid another war or another conflict were to start, that would only thin us even more to
Oh,
allow for our adversaries to just take over and take advantage of what's going on, which is what we're seeing with China and even Russia. They're giving Iran additional and even more in-depth intelligence, as Muhammad was stating earlier. So we're seeing all of our adversaries work together in numerous ways, our allies not being protected, and we are only in firm walking step with Israel at the moment. And it's not going to be great for us on the international stage once this conflict is hopefully resolved. I mean, who knows when that's going to be?
yeah.
But
Who
yeah, I mean,
knows?
there's no good options left to basically end this conflict quickly. And people have been stating within the Department of War, Defense, however you want to state it, this is due to the terrain, distance, lack of ground forces, and the durability of the Iranian government. And there are serious discussions now, which include nuclear options and futuristic weapons, which were previously tested in Venezuela. If everyone remembers those sonic weapons that were used on the Venezuelan guards, which they were feeling dizzy, throwing up, had no clue what was going on. We still have those capabilities. So these things are on the table for the possibility because they're understanding that Iran is standing the test of time. They have been here for millennia. Well, I'm not sure of a millennium, but longer than us, I know that. But they're truly
Yeah.
seeing that they're
Yeah.
not a government that's going to cower in any strategic way. They're this, and I mean, there's no sight that the United States can walk away with this as being a win.
Oh,
If
victory lap.
everything
No way.
goes, if we do try to take over the Strait of Hormuz with troops and it goes horribly wrong, I don't know what comes next from that.
I mean,
Like,
that's the
how do you
question.
even,
Like, what's the goal? Like, what is the objective here? What are they trying to accomplish?
yeah,
Like, really,
I
those are the
mean, there
things
is
that.
no objective. When
Yeah.
we'll get to the testimony, domestic part, but Tulsi Gabbard, you could even say she was throwing Trump under the bus and what she was saying. She wasn't even able to answer some questions. It's like, what's going on here when you have, U.S. casualties, which have already reached at least 500, with many deaths and injuries still unacknowledged by the Pentagon. And America has lost four fixed wing aircrafts and more than in the previous 20 years combined, downed not by accidents, but by sympathizers inside the Kuwait Air Force. So Kuwait's an ally, and we have sympathizers who were bombing our own jets. And then we have, with that, that's due to pilots acting rogue and further fractures in regional alliances, which are now plausible, as we have just been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, just look exactly. I mean, the Middle Eastern Gulf states were already getting fed up with the American behavior, and then you got going along what's going on. I mean, if Saudi Arabia leaves the support of America, a lot of Muslim countries will follow because Saudi Arabia does hold a lot of weight and a lot of stock. Oh, my bad, that was my cat.
No, you're fine.
Saudi Arabia does hold a lot of weight and a lot of stock in the
Yeah.
Muslim world for multiple reasons. And what we're going to see is the more the United States thinks it's owed its allegiance from these countries, the more we'll see it act in a very arrogant manner that will really turn these countries away from it. And I mean, we've already started seeing that with the reason why Saudi Arabia signed that defense pact with Pakistan is because of the Qatar strikes.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing Pakistan be deemed a nuclear target, a nuclear enemy of America, which, mind you, Pakistan has never attacked us. Pakistan did harbor Osama bin Laden. I'll say that.
Yeah.
But
So
after
don't
we
the Kurds come from Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken,
I'd have to
or is that
double
Turkey?
check. But
I
just
forget
in
which
general, as the
country they come
country as a
from.
whole has been friendly with America.
Yeah, basically.
There's been a few things that that have caused us issues with them. One of them being the harboring of Osama bin Laden. But even when it came to that, We invaded the country, killed Osama, and left in the middle of the night. And they point being is that we've attempted to have economic and diplomatic relations with Pakistan to some success. Honestly, not as much success as Saudi Arabia, but to some success. So now that we're in this position where we're seeing so many of our stock munitions be used up, we're seeing what's really needing to be said, and that is that the United States needs to mobilize a massive amount of its military to be able to
Yeah,
really actually surmount any kind of reputable offensive.
yeah,
And
pretty
I
much.
have my one friend whose dad is like a retired colonel, I believe. He was in the military for like 25, 30 years. I asked them, I was like, can you ask your dad about what he thinks about this all? Because I'd be interested in hearing his opinion. And she got back to me. She said, "Oh, well, he said that he wouldn't be concerned if it wasn't Pete Hesgith in charge of the Department of War." And that
It's a
made
fair
me laugh
assessment.
because it really made me think about how Pete Hesgith has been using divinity, and like how this is a big thing for God as his reasoning for it, and how this man is actually in charge of what gets done at the end of the day. Then there's of course the commander in chief, the president, who like who's the one that triggers the operations. But
Right.
at the end of
Yeah.
the day, Hesgith is the one who leads the DOW. And what we've been seeing is that with his Operation Epic Fury, it's not been epic nor furious at all. It's
No, it's been the complete opposite across the board.
yeah,
And on top of our allies, I mean, our adversaries sharing information, what we have more on that is that they have been collecting real-time combat data, supplying satellites and intelligence reports to Iran, and they've also successfully cracked the communication signals for America's B-2 bombers, stripping one of our primary nuclear delivery platforms of its stealth advantage and effectively ruining the nuclear deterrence playing field, because that was the bomber that Trump was holding and was hugging during one of his press conference the other day. But we're seeing that they're getting more and more in depth in this level of intelligence sharing, and we're having all of our wounds exposed within this war that are going to be things that our adversaries will use for their advantage. And God bless his soul, but Joe Kent,
who
the
can't.
individual
Poor
that,
guy.
yeah, the guy that resigned from the head of counterterrorism, recognized this reality, and stated the best course is to stop digging the hole deeper by ceasing combat operations before the conflict spirals into a new world war with far greater American and allies lost. And he did resign over the Iranian war. He resigned because he knew that we were pulled into this war because of Israel. He could not stomach that anymore. And mind you, he was the top official when it came to counterterrorism. He understood what was going on and why this war was so unjust in every right. And that unjust war has had a lot of domestic debacles that have taken place, which we are going to start getting into, with first being the market and economic fallout. So we've already
Yeah,
stated
here.
how,
Let
yeah,
me let me cover this because I want to chat a little bit about the economy specifically. Because we already touched a little bit about it earlier about how Powell has come out and said that inflation has been largely caused by tariffs and what's been going on with the global policy of America. But if you all remember, which still makes me laugh, they when Pam Bondi testified for the Epstein files, she famously stated, "The Dow's over 50,000. Who cares?" I want to keep this in mind. The Dow was over 50,000 for 3 days. One of those 3 days was the 3 days she testified. And now what we're seeing is that over $800 billion was wiped from the US stock market value today, as the Dow Jones posted its lowest close of 2026 so far. February wholesale inflation actually data was released this week, and it came in hotter than expected, with producer prices rising 3.4% year over year, which is the largest monthly jump in a full year, while core PPI increased to 3.9%. Inflation is not looking good, and the economy is stagnating. Now, take in mind, if you guys remember what Jerome Powell said a year ago, months ago, That stagflation was the one thing he was working to avoid because of how bad it is for the economy. Stagflation, for those who don't might not know, is when the economy stagnates and inflation still occurs. Because
Yeah.
that usually what happens is, this is a good example of the depression and recession. What happened during the depression, the economy completely crapped the bed, but the power of the dollar increased because it was being used in a much more despairing manner, and it was just being less. It was being. This is before the gold standard was revoked, but the dollar was just being essentially hoarded more, so it was being used less. And then when it came to the gold standard being revoked, we still saw that same issue, as the American government can now, with the Federal Reserve, can handle how much money it produces and supplies. When that quantitative easing eases off and the government stops making so much money and people start spending less, the value of a dollar goes up because it's being used less. They And so, with all that said, seeing stagnation and inflation is bad, because generally, with stagnation, you get opposite of it. You get deflation, but that's not what's occurring now. Actually, analysts emphasize that this snapshot does not yet fully reflect the full inflationary impact of the Iranian war, which is already pricing rate cuts out of the market for the foreseeable future. A Fox commentator actually even reacted sharply, saying, "I'm really, really not happy about this inflation report. This does not look good to me. Prices are up by 3.11%. You're up 4.3% year over year." And Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who we've mentioned a few times, commented on the Trump era jobs market over the past 6 months, saying there is effectively zero net job creation in the private sector.
Yeah, we knew that
Now,
was coming. Knew that
take
was
in
coming.
mind that this is also saying that with the government has been firing and hiring left and right with Doge, and then the debacle of the DOE, and then the DOE being put back in place, and then all the Doge employees needing to come back because they were fired in a way that made those departments unable to even do their jobs. It's been a To put it in honestly one of the most appropriate manners, it's been a shit show. And with all this occurring, President Trump's net approval rating has plummeted to a historic low of negative 15.3% because of the mounting economic pain and questions over his war management. Now, for we the big reason Trump won was running on the idea of no new wars and the economy will do good. Both those two key things are clearly wrong, untrue now. Clearly
Yeah, he
untrue.
basically gets an F on all promises across the board. I mean, we've said on this podcast multiple times when the job numbers were coming out that, and then when the corrections came out, that it was that a little bit of inflatedness of Biden from his 4 years. But then now with all these numbers coming out and nothing getting better at all, prices up 3.11%, just 4.3% year over year. This is not the golden age economy that
By any means.
any American was looking forward to, or even any MAGA voter was looking forward to. I mean, from energy, from food, from gas to household appliances, and anything you can name it, everything has gone up and nothing has really gotten better from even looking at the first year of the Biden administration. I would imagine most MAGA voters are truly understanding that they have been sold a bill of goods because everything that he said he was going to do, he's doing the opposite. I mean, there's no movement on the wall. Mass deportations is completely thrown out of the equation. We have this new war with Iran. Epstein files are still out there and still running amok with no one taking accountability for it, except it's going to fall on Pam Bondi when she comes in front of the oversight committee.
And
It's
the
just like all
Dow is
these
over
things. Yeah, yeah.
50,000.
Her nonsense with the Dow and so forth. So it's like all of these things are building up, and the Republicans will have to answer for this when Democrats are in power and when the voters rebuke them at the ballot box come midterms and elections down the line. Because as prices are surging, the U.S. national gas prices have surged to $3.84 per gallon, a jump of more than 92 cents from roughly a month ago and 27 cents from just last week. This is directly tied to the conflict's disruption of global oil flows. Brent crude oil extended its gains, actually climbing up to, before I had hopped on, I have 108 here in our notes, but it actually went up to 111 before we got on, and this is promoting Vice President Vance to schedule urgent meetings with oil executives as fuel prices continue their sharp rise. So not only did the president have to meet with heads of the military industrial complex over the such quick usage and spending of the munitions, we now have the vice president meeting with the oil execs over the high costs and the what's in the situation that's going on in Iran and how is that fully going to plan out. And if you're looking to fly anywhere within the next few months, Delta's CEO has warned that the jet fuel price has spiked alone, which has added as much as 400 million to the airline's cost in March, signaling a broad-based hikes in flight prices for consumers. So not only are you going to have these high prices from the Iranian war, but you're also going to have disruptions in TSA lines because the DHS bill is still not fully funded. So I do know the Senate Democrats did block that action, but you are seeing a lot of torment really being turned around on the American citizens because that DHS funding bill could very well pass if the reforms are just taken into consideration that are satisfactory to the Democrats. And Republicans don't have the votes, so they have to concede to some of those. But as
Yeah.
well as with all of this going on, the White House has emphasized that they state that the United States does not need the Strait of Hormuz to secure energy for the American people, which is not the case at all. There's 20% of the world's oil comes through that. We
I,
wouldn't be
I want to
trying to
add
put,
this.
yeah,
America is the world's largest oil producer, and we do use a lot of our own oil.
yeah,
It doesn't change the fact of how global oil prices go and what the consumer will have to pay at the end of the day.
exactly. So at that point, it's like if it's not that important, then why, once it's closed, we're seeing such high levels of increases
Yeah.
in gas prices and in energy across the board. I mean, it's just ridiculous that we're even having this conversation after he's made statements about not wanting new wars, and everyone from his staff, from his cabinet, has stated those things while they were in the run for office. And meanwhile, the national debt, 39 trillion, $39 trillion, with, if our listeners do not know this, 27% of that total was accumulated during spending under Trump's presidencies. So from 2017, from his first presidency till now, we're seeing that he has contributed 27% of the total national debt. Just
More
think
than a
about that.
quarter of the debt is one guy.
Yes, more than
That's
a quarter.
crazy.
These Republicans that are deficit hawks and individuals that want to get spending down and have cuts X, Y, and Z, we're seeing that they don't care about that at all, and they don't care about the consumer. Kevin Hassett, who's a part of the administration, downplayed the long-term economic disruption, stating that an extended war would hurt consumers, but remains the last of our concerns right now are the consumers.
Yeah.
Literally, they're just putting it out there for us at this point. They know that we are at the bottom dollar of all of this, and they are only enriching the ones that are at the 1%, while the 99% of us have to deal with all of these skyrocketing costs on a daily basis. And it's going to be up to us listeners, voters, to answer by being at the ballot box come the midterms and be able to let your voice heard, whether you still want to have this nonsense continue through a different president, or do you want to see possibly a new day by the Democrats coming in office and possibly retracting and redoing a lot of the damage that has been done. And I do want to bring back and focus on really the Joe Kent resignation here, because it's actually it's a lot bigger than we can really like think about, because he's the top guy,
Yeah.
top
I want to
individual
add this
on
before
all
I
of
go to
this.
heat up
Yeah.
food. It's funny to me, the big issue of what's going on. Well, one of the many big issues of what's going on, is that the U.S. intelligence will say one thing, and then the administration and the president will do a complete other.
Oh, completely. And we saw that with 9/11. We're seeing that with this now. And Joe Kent, he was the director of National Counterterrorism Center and a top Trump appointed counterterrorism official. He resigned yesterday, becoming the highest ranking of administration official to quit in opposition to the U.S. Israeli war in Iran, now on its 19th day. In a public resignation letter to President Trump, which was posted on X, Kent stated, I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. He further criticized high ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media for spreading misinformation about an imminent Iranian threat and subverting Trump's America First agenda. Kent was a retired Green Beret and a long term Trump supporter, known for promoting conspiracy theories which referenced his who was which was referenced by his late wife. And this underscored his reluctance to send the next generation off to fight and die in Iran for Israel. President Trump responded dismissively, which who could have guessed? He says, I have always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security. It's a good thing he's out because he said Iran was not a threat. DNI Tulsi Gabbard, Kent's boss, issued a carefully worded statement supporting the president without directly addressing Kent's claims. Then we also have Vice President J.D. Vance welcomed disagreement but affirmed the resignation is appropriate if an official cannot implement the administration's decisions. The resignation highlights emerging divisions in the MAGA coalition between anti interventionists who backed Trump's past criticisms of endless war and the current open ended conflict, making the first major internal fracture over policy. Senate Democrats are expected to force an Iran war powers vote sometime this evening, which may either be taking place or might have already happened, and this will allow them to disrupt the voting on the Save Act, which is there's going to be debate going on the Save Act, and they're going to try to filibuster that with forcing a vote on the Iran War Powers Act, which they're going to be using a procedural privilege motion that allows them to disrupt that Save Act debate. And during recent hearings, which was today, Senator Mark Kelly showed actually Tulsi Gabbard a email to donors from Trump promising access to national security briefings in exchange for cash. Gabbard deferred directly to President Trump when asked if Iran posed an imminent threat. And Israeli media outlets are reporting that Trump has resolved to prosecute the war to the end until the Iranian regime collapses. So we're now seeing that Trump is not even taking the advice of his own counsel, which is a warning of difficult days ahead for the world. And we're also seeing that his advisors are starting to state that it comes directly from him or deferring directly to President Trump about these emails from going to donors about wanting them to get cash for these briefings, these intelligence briefings, and as well as intelligence from our very reputable agencies aren't even being considered as truth when it comes to how we even went about this attack. It's just completely obscene from what we've seen. Not really, actually, no, it's not really obscene from what we've seen from this administration. It's really just disheartening to see that we're going down the same steps that we did with the Bush administration. We're seeing lies after lies after lies, miscommunication on miscommunication on really what's going on in Iran and really what's the reasoning for it. I know the Americans know the reasoning for it, but sometimes you just need to hear it from the horse's mouth to know what exactly the reasoning is, or at least get that level of validation that you've always known what the situation was all along. And
Honestly,
as
a
yeah,
little bit of directness, then some honesty could go a very long way. as a politician.
No, very long way. And, once midterms are over, if Democrats are the ones in power, they will have to answer for all of this. Yes, they will have their hearings currently now. I know they want to bring in Rubio, Hegseth, and a list of other people as well. But yes, they'll answer for this Epstein files. There's a laundry list of things that Democrats can really hold the Trump administration's feet to the fire, and I really hope that's the case because we can't have what happened from his first presidency. It kind of washed our hands with it. We got Biden. We said, okay, let's just let bygones be bygones. Let's not go after anyone. Yes, they did legally go after Donald Trump for everything they were talking about with Russia and also the January 6th and all of those situations. But that is a viable situation for those things to happen. When everything that's happening right now, these things are going to need to be brought up by Democrats because it's only going to pave the way for the next Republican to do it. They see Trump was not, reprimanded for these things by the opposing party, then they're just going to keep doing and keep pushing the envelope to a point to where we can no longer shut it back.
Yeah.
And yeah, and as we always say before signing off to our listeners, thank you again for joining us today on Behind the Ballot, where we keep politics engaged, balanced, and informative. Stay curious, stay critical, and stay involved. I'm Mikkel Jenkins, and until next time, keep looking beyond the headlines and behind the ballot. And we are looking to have a lot more special guests. It's actually been a lot of emails to answer. So do look for those episodes and all of the great in-depth interviews and analysis that we'll have going forward.
And to add on to that note, thank you all for listening. God bless you all. God